Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com. Excited to be with you on the 30th day of January 2018 as we get set for the month of February. Obviously, a couple days away from Super Bowl number 52, where we got the Philadelphia Eagles and the New England Patriots. Obviously, enough time that's going to go by before that, in which we'll have the opportunity to preview it and discuss it. And I'm sure there's a ton of stuff going on where you got reporters that are literally doing everything they possibly can to try to get a story today. We look at the emergence of what became at one point Radio Row as we look at it in the Super Bowl. And it's, fascinating. I like it. I like where it comes from. The origins of it are something that is kind of special. I mean, I think of it. And we are already having some technical difficulties. So for that, I apologize. Or maybe we're not. We'll see. Let me know. I'm sure we'll get some comments if there's any issues. But the... you got Media Row as it's set right now. And, unfortunately, as we do have some technical issues on Facebook Live, I do want to welcome everybody, though, for the opportunity to see, an updated, a different show, a different setup. I'm actually glad to be with you right now. So, let's see. Maybe you see me, maybe you don't. It is funny kind of looking at the backs here, but happy to be with you on the 30th day of January 2018. We cleared up a little bit of issue, but what I was talking about in regards to Radio Row when it comes to football, it's such a big event for a lot of people in the media. And those that have a chance to be down there and set up and broadcast during the week have a great opportunity to, of course, associate with a lot of different people in the NFL. And in some cases do a show and do a quality show and set something up in regards to what their listeners want to hear. But you get to a certain point and it's overkill. And I understand, it's become wherever the Super Bowl setting is. It's a nice hangout place for people that are associated with the game. So as you're going up and down, if you're a good producer, you should have the ability to get some very quality guests on your shows. But at the same time, I tell you, Media Row or Radio Row as it's set up in the Super Bowl will be much better if it was just 1 week. Now, the fact that, I understand the first week almost goes by and we're in week number 2. But, the attention that gets put on, the coverage of it, I don't think it gets backed up by the amount of people, whether they are, giving the attention that these stations, whether they're radio, TV, whatever networks that are there. Obviously, there's a ton of them. Everybody feels like they need to be there. But are they getting the actual results that they're looking for? Do they, if they want 1 million listeners, are they getting 1 million listeners? Are they expecting 1 million listeners? Are they getting that? Because the whole doing this over and over again, talking about the Eagles and the Patriots, and sitting there as reporters digging for a story, like that reporter from New England that decides to ask Tom Brady, or makes a bad, nasty comment to Tom Brady about his daughter. I mean, it's showing that we are in a level right now where we are hitting the lowest of the lows in regards to journalism and reporting. And I wonder if an event like the Super Bowl week or the Super Bowl 2 weeks that we have right now is putting ourselves in a position where, we do have something to be fearful of. Because I don't like the way this is set up. It bothers me because people they don't have enough of a story to put together. You can analyze the Eagles. You can analyze the Patriots. You can have a ton of guests on your program. But what are you doing that's separating yourself from the next guy? If you're a diehard sports fan or a diehard football fan that just can't wait to hear NFL talk all the time, I would even think that you would get to a certain point where you may not be able to deal with the overkill of the Super Bowl as we get ready for it. This is Tuesday. There's still, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You're looking at still 6 days left before the Super Bowl. So you're going to have some ass clown writer or journalist or reporter that is going to do something similar to what what the guy did to Tom Brady, making a comment about his daughter, anything to make a story. And to say that wasn't, set up beforehand, that wasn't premeditated, come on. Reporters now would do anything they possibly could to get some attention to themselves. A week is not going anywhere. This guy thinks it's his ticket. I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm going to say something, insulting to Tom Brady about his 5-year-old daughter. That should work. Well, Wednesday's going to come up. Thursday's going to come up. And you know what? There's going to be a bunch more clowns looking to see what they could try to come up with to draw attention to themselves. Because I think part of the problem is the fact that you have a game, when you're promoting the game 2 weeks ahead of time, to break down every facet of what each one of the teams is doing or not doing or can do, all you're going to do is lose the interest of the person that is following and trying to listen or watch your show. So what else can you do to add to it? Well, listen, you can interview everybody that's on Radio Row, and I promise you by Friday or Saturday, you're going to be out of things to do. I want to throw the number out there, 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. You want to call in, be part of the Passball Show, live with you until 7 o'clock p.m. today. We did hear some very sad news, a very unfortunate situation where you hear the passing of longtime Major League executive Kevin Towers. He passes away after a bout with cancer at the age of 56. And this was a guy that I had a chance to meet a couple of years ago in Washington, D.C. And to make a little, try to have a little fun with it. I mean, I actually thought he was Bud Black when I was talking to him. And it turns out, he was Kevin Towers. I didn't ask him if he was Bud Black, but the conversation that I had with him, I thought he was Bud Black. And it's unfortunate that it took until I left the conversation that I realized that it was, in fact, Kevin Towers. And this is a guy that spent a lot of time, in Major League front offices, 15 years as a general manager of the San Diego Padres. And let's be serious. I mean, there are some general managers that stay in that position for a long time. You look at Brian Cashman with the Yankees. You look at, Billy Beane passing it over to David Forst. Brian Sabian passing it down to Bobby Evans. So you do have general managers that are there for a while take the position of president and then put somebody else in place. But, you look at Kevin Towers and a lot of ups and downs with the San Diego Padres. He led the team to 4 division titles. He led the team to a World Series appearance in 1998. Was responsible for bringing in a lot of good young pitchers, but not necessarily stars. He brought in pitchers that were good, that he seemed to be able to get a little more out of than other teams were able to do. And that probably had the most to do with the Padres' success, up and down. I remember the 2006 NL West Championship with the Padres, and Jake Peavy, who did an outstanding job, was the leader of that staff. And outside of that, it was probably hard to name another pitcher or two that was there. And Kevin Towers had that ability to really find pitchers that other teams were not really looking at seriously, and were able to find very good roles for them on their staff. Now, I think a lot of it had to do with having a right manager. You know, the fact that he was there with Bruce Bochy, and Bruce Bochy stuck around for, you know, a very long period of time. But if you look at the 2006 Padres, you know, you look at a guy like Chris Young, and we're talking about, you know, Chris Young, who's been up and down in the majors with the Royals, a little bit with the Mets, was traded to the Rangers from the Padres. Woody Williams at almost 40 years of age, you know, to get another solid season and 12 wins out of him. But you look at other guys like, you know, Mike Thompson, Clay Hensley. Clay Hensley only had one good season in the major leagues as a pitcher. Was it a coincidence that it happened with the San Diego Padres? Obviously, to have Trevor Hoffman there. And, you know, no doubt about it, having Tony Gwynn as the face of your franchise for at least part of the time that he was there. But, yeah, he was able to get a little bit more out of pitchers that otherwise did not have very good careers, otherwise did not have a lot of success at the major league level. So, you know, looking back on it, this is a man that obviously is taken way too soon. He was currently working at the very moment with the Cincinnati Reds in their front office as a special assistant to Walt Jocketty and Dick Williams. And a guy that certainly had a very good mind for baseball, considered one of the old school. Still had thought used enough in regards to, you know, the older methods in regards to scouting and stuff like that, put a lot of emphasis in it. And, you know, probably was in a position where, I hate to say it, may not have gotten another job as a major league general manager. And that had nothing to do with him. There was nothing that Kevin Towers did that would keep him from getting another opportunity to be a general manager. You're just looking at where GMs are coming from now. GMs are coming from the databases. They're coming from the computer room, the board room, where people are just compiling data and studying numbers. That's where your next general managers are coming from, and they're all a lot younger. But what I would like to see in baseball, and I'm hoping that we get back to it at some point, because you always see ideas that come up in sports, and once the idea catches on and people see that there's some success behind it, they jump out and duplicate it. So the Houston Astros and the Los Angeles Dodgers and the teams that are most entrenched with the use of analytics now, because they're succeeding, everybody feels the need to involve themselves in it. Everybody feels the need to do that too. So the duplication is happening throughout the sport, and you're going to find that there are going to be not just a couple teams, but many teams that are going to use this philosophy, that are going to overemphasize, you know, the numbers and the data people that they have within their organization, and they're going to end up failing. They're going to end up struggling. And once they do that, I hope cooler heads prevail, and executives within these organizations, and maybe if it has to be owners, step in and say, what about the older ways that used to work? What about an emphasis in scouting? What about using an old school baseball mind to pick his brain and ask him what direction he thinks that our particular team needs to go in? And I think similar to what I was saying a couple days ago about baseball salaries, which I think they're actually hitting a point where they are plateauing right now. Whether you believe it, whether you don't believe it, you know, it's funny to say, but I look at another thing that will plateau at some point, and that is the overuse or the use of extensive analytics in Major League Baseball. And I look at it this way. I feel there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to struggle. They're going to struggle for different reasons. I don't think every organization in their hierarchy, from their ownership down, is best equipped to embrace this type of data analysis. I think there are some owners that aren't going anywhere soon that from a financial standpoint have the ability to run their franchise and are just never going to get themselves to a point where they're going to want somebody that is 100% data driven running their organization. Now, if that happens, if we get to a point where, let's say, every team has somebody that's running like that, well, there are going to be some teams that struggle. So if we're talking right now, there might be a couple owners that are holding off and aren't going to completely go that route with their general manager. We'll hit a point where maybe all 30 teams in Major League Baseball have a general manager that is 100% on, obsessed with the use of data and analytics. So after that happens, how many of them are going to struggle? One team's going to win the World Series each year. We know that. Regardless of the way a baseball team is run, we know that there's going to be one World Series champion every year. That means 29 other teams are not going to win. And out of those 29 other teams, some teams are going to look really bad. Some teams are going to have a ton of emphasis on data and analytics. And they are going to have such a horrible season that they're going to question whether or not it makes the most sense to continue the emphasis that they're putting on this. And I do think at some point you're going to see a plateau. And once this plateau happens, you're going to see the older baseball minds who have kind of been kicked to the side recently over the last couple of years, last 5 years, even the last 10 years, they're going to be welcomed back into baseball. And the old school philosophies are going to start to be put back in to the running of Major League Baseball teams. And I think once this happens, I don't know, maybe an old school general manager comes back in, runs his team his way, and wins a World Series. And a team that has had success with the use of data and analytics decides to back off of it a little bit. But what have I said all along? I've said, most importantly about this topic, that you need to have some sort of balance. And the problem is that, you have people, and all you have to go is to the world of Twitter, where you got the people that are so focused on the use of data and analytics that they think of it as the only way. And I understand scouts are a little ticked off. Certain scouts are turned away. They're pissed off by the way that, their services seem to be no longer needed. And I think that does impact, their bitterness as they come out and say, it's a computer geek that's behind a computer screen that doesn't know anything about baseball. Because I think in the end, if you're going to run a successful organization, you need to have the best scouts that are able to see with their own eyes the talent that's on the field, not just within their own team, but scouting other teams, scouting the minor leagues, scouting independent baseball, scouting colleges and high school. To discover what you see with your own eyes, I think is just as important as the modern day sports analyst is looking at just the numbers. I think the numbers mean something. And I think if you want to talk about wins above replacement at the professional level, I think it has certainly, some value. If we look at on base plus slugging, WHIP, OPS plus, ERA plus, as we adjust the statistics to the particular ballpark that a player plays in, these are all important when we're looking to study the game and we're analyzing what is working and what isn't working. But also, if you look at something, and here's another part of it that I haven't really brought up yet, and I think it's pretty obvious. And I think once I say it, your answer may be, wow, you know what? It seems pretty obvious to me. But when we think about the use of, let's say, a hitting coach or a scout that is watching somebody's philosophy, well, if you're just studying numbers all day, what if there is something that is mechanically wrong with the way a pitcher is throwing a ball or the way a batter is swinging? Now, the easy answer may be, John, well, That's what a pitching coach is for. That's what a hitting coach is for. But what if you're looking at something that isn't necessarily seen in the numbers? Like if there is an adjustment that you know you can make as a scout for a pitcher that is pitching for, let's say, the Somerset Patriots or the Long Island Ducks, and you're watching him as he's throwing, and you think that if you use, from your scouting perspective and the people that you have in your organization, that you could fix a flaw in a mechanic that you see that may not be 100% obvious, may not be obvious to the player's pitching coach, may not be obvious to anybody in a league. This isn't an example of a guy tipping his pitches. The results are still there, but the results could be even better if you give this person a little tutelage. Well, if you're just studying numbers and you're saying, hey, he made 24 starts, he was 10-6 with a 2.96 earned run average. I think I want him on my major league team. His ERA plus was good. Well, you may want to have a scout that's actually seen him that may see a flaw in his mechanics. And maybe that flaw can be corrected, or maybe that flaw cannot be corrected. I don't think we're ever going to hit a spot where a baseball team is not going to need very good scouts. And I'm not talking about scouts like we're talking about now. Some guys studying some data and picking players like it's a fantasy baseball lineup. We need actual scouts at stadiums, because their value to the game they brought tremendous success to the game for many years. And I tell you, you put a good group of scouts together, and I think they can match up as well as any analytics team that you put together. But the problem is we're at the age where it's either scouts or data guys or girls. But in the end, the team that succeeds, probably the one that can succeed over the longest period of time, will probably have a good balance of both. And if that's the case, then what are we spending time arguing about? Why are data guys saying, hey, this is the real age of baseball, scouts need to go? Why are scouts saying, you don't know anything about baseball, all you do is stand behind a computer screen? In the end, you're going to need to work hand in hand. And I think it's pretty similar to where we're at as a country right now. And I'm not going to elaborate on this point too much. But we all do need each other. And pretty similar to the way a Major League Baseball team needs scouts and needs data people. They may not always see eye to eye, but the fruits of both of their hard work individually as groups are for the betterment of the team. And we got to realize that we're all different for many different reasons. Some of them are out of our control. Others are choices that we've made. Others are just straight up, people have segregated themselves into groups saying and making claims that they're so different from other people. It's the responsibility of everybody to stand up and try to work hand in hand with each other. And it may seem during some periods of time like it's tough, like it can't work or it won't work. Or maybe one person looks at themselves in the mirror and says that, the next person couldn't be any more different than me, whether it's physically, whether it's ideologically, whether it's through sociology or psychology, whatever you want to look at. But we got to start realizing that we all need each other. And when we try to blame division on somebody that's not us, we are actually blaming ourselves. Problem is, we're just not taking responsibility for it. Calling out somebody else, saying that they're responsible for a nation or groups of people being divided, is kind of making the declaration that they are for division by themselves. And I hope at some point we take some more strides towards that. But I think it's a pretty good, connection. You got data and analytics against scouting in Major League Baseball, and we need that. We both need, a good baseball team needs a combination of both. But America, the nation of immigrants, the nation that exists with the most differences amongst its own people, because there is no American. American could be a million different combinations of what a person could look like. And on the night where the president is going to make his State of the Union address, and I would say 100% of the people that are watching it have already decided whether they like it or don't. And they haven't even heard a word that he said. The biasness that exists amongst the people that we have in this country is disgusting. So there's people that, are going to try to look for everything wrong in what Mr. Trump says. And there's also people that, even if he went out there and said the most evilest of things in his State of the Union address, they wouldn't admit it. So once again, we're stuck in our own biasness where we will refuse to change how it is that we feel. And it's unfortunate because the country that we live in has put us in those positions. You feel like you can't be an individual anymore. You have to belong to something. As we hit the halfway point here in the Pass Ball Show. Once again, John Pielli here with you. The number is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. Just wrapping up a couple things about this point I'm making in regards to the country we live in. And, let's stay together. I think we can do it. The problem is when you hear anybody talking about it, it's like, I just don't want to hear it. And here's the issue. The issue is when people shut their ears to the thought of anybody making any comment that regards the people of the country. And I'm saying this, whether you like me or not, and I don't care. If you're watching a show for the first time, you want me to talk about Super Bowl previews for the next 6 days, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. You could turn it off. You could go somewhere else for your information. I'd love you to listen. I'd love you to watch. But this is something I'm just as passionate about. And I'm not passionate about politics, but when we hear the United States of America, when that gets thrown out there, all of a sudden it's assumed that we're talking about politics. And I'm not. I'm not a political guy. I could care less about politics. In fact, I look at the Republican Democratic parties that we have in this country as two terrorist groups that are working the best they can individually to divide its people. It's two major cults. And many people have chosen to drink one of the flavored Kool-Aids. And, they are stuck within their own decisions. They can't think for themselves anymore. And I really feel that the more I talk about this, at least it's out there. And if nobody listens to this, if everybody that hears me talking about this turns this off, then at least I tried. But I feel I have a voice. And I know deep down under the roots of most people that are watching and most people that aren't watching, there are little kids that used to be able to walk around areas and be around people that were so much different than them. And all of a sudden, as adults, we grew up. And as adults, people joined cults. And they joined either the Republican cult or the Democratic cult. And they have pretty much sold their individuality to them. And I hope at some point we start to look more objectively and create a common ground that's in the middle that will allow for us to be able to deal with our own differences and understand that we're all going to have differences. But rather than be at each other's throats over this stupid, evil thing that the devil created called politics, we can make our nation stronger. And we could all be more open-minded and figure out what it is that one person needs as opposed to what the other person needs. And why I'm different to you and you're different to the next person. And the next person is different from the next person after that. I think we could get there. Moving on, summarizing what we've gotten to the point if you're just tuning in. Kevin Towers, longtime Major League executive, passes away at the age of 56. A very sad story, a bout with cancer. And I guess when I had met him, it must have been within a month or so when he was diagnosed, because it said that, in the reports today, it said that he was battling for about 14 months. So I guess it was a year ago, November. Baseball winter meetings in Washington, D.C. were December of 2016. So I had no idea, and I'm sure from a personal standpoint, maybe he did want to keep it private. But it's very sad, to see a guy that, has done a lot in regards to Major League Baseball and is considered one of the older school guys, but at the age of 56 was certainly not very old. We're talking about things that can allow for us to kind of work and unify ourselves. And I was mentioning how it applies to baseball because, you have the old school guys that are more interested in scouting and everything that's worked for years before. And you have people that are involved in data and analytics that are just focused on formulas and theorems and probability and numbers, and may not spend that much time in baseball. So you think that, hey, the scout would love to have a little bit extra, numbers or be able to back up what they are studying with a little bit extra data. And that data analyst that may not know a lot about baseball would like to have somebody there, ideally, that could teach him a thing or two about the game. So you would think from that perspective, one hand should take care of the other. Unfortunately, the exact opposite is going on in baseball. You have, Yale and Harvard grads that are studying sports management. They're getting involved in Major League Baseball teams, and they want nothing to do with actual baseball and how it's played on the field. They're telling you, I'm going to build you a team, and these are my formulas, and players that equal these numbers are the ones that I want. I don't care anything about them. I just want players that add up to these numbers. And if you think for a second that the Houston Astros and the Los Angeles Dodgers are 100% doing that, well, listen, you look at some decisions that are made in the World Series when Rich Hill gets taken out of a game when the 19th batter comes up in the fourth inning and he's throwing the ball pretty well, hasn't thrown a lot of pitches. There is still some old school baseball in there. And I don't know if it's necessarily applies to the manager. And here's where the game is kind of changing a little bit. Managers now are pretty much a piggyback off of what the data-driven front office is doing. So a manager that used to be able to go with his gut and make a decision or override something that may be against the formula of what a team is looking to do by the numbers, he doesn't really have that right anymore. And you've seen it. I know it's happened in the world of front offices. We've talked about a guy like Kevin Towers, and if he was healthy and in 100% shape, he might have a tough time getting another job as a general manager in Major League Baseball. You know, you look at Buck Showalter and maybe a Bruce Bochy. And I'm sure there's a couple other managers that are right on the fringe of being considered an old school manager. You've watched this offseason where Joe Girardi and Dusty Baker were let go from their jobs and replaced by guys that are more number savvy. Certainly Aaron Boone with the Yankees. Dave Martinez. You know, he's a former Major League player who's had some success, but he has spent a lot of time working for Joe Madden, and he was kind of Joe Madden's numbers guy on the field. So, pretty similar to what I was talking about before when it comes to general managers. The fact that managers now, and you want to say there's 20 of them out of 30, that are more data analyzers than they are kind of going by the book, you know, by their book or what they see. You know, it's amazing too, because I think of the Yankee fans over the past couple of years, one of the criticisms of Joe Girardi from the fans has been the fact that he relies on his binder and, you know, brings in a lefty when a lefty comes up to bat, or brings in a righty when a right-hander comes to bat. And he ends up losing his job and is being replaced by a person that is 100% number savvy in Aaron Boone. But I just think that's funny. The problem is that, you know, older school baseball fans are going to look at the game differently than a young kid that's watching a game within this century or this decade. Because the young fan only sees what they've seen with their own eyes. Sure, the history of what has happened still exists. And that's one of the things that I want to continue to get out there and make sure that the youngest of young sports fans, and in this case we're talking about baseball, the game goes back 150 years. And so many times throughout its history, the game has changed for safety reasons. I mean, you used to have, you know, years upon years where players didn't wear batting helmets. Catchers in the 19th century didn't even wear catcher's equipment. In fact, the original catcher would be there to catch a lobbed ball and would literally wait by the fence for the ball to stop rolling to throw it back, because they were worried about getting hit with the bat, getting hit by a foul. And all of a sudden, with the help of a catcher by the name of Silver Flint, they decided to use some sort of protective equipment, which when it first started out, it wasn't very good. And obviously you look at what catchers wear today, it's almost like they have a set of armor. You know, the extensions of their shin guards and their chest protectors, and of course the helmets that end up covering your neck. So from a safety standpoint, you've seen the game has grown. But the same philosophy cannot apply when we're talking about information. Because the way to get information, though we are benefited with extra technology, we should not forget about the way that we used to get information. Now, the person that's studying data analysis in baseball and thinks it's the only thing is like the person, and their backing of this is the way that they're going to tell the story. They're going to tell you that, you know, all of a sudden it was decided that they came up with protective equipment for catchers. Once you have that equipment, you're going to use it from here on out. Nobody's going to catch behind the plate in Major League Baseball or any form of baseball without wearing equipment anymore. Now, data is important, but if you start to forget about things that you see with the eye test, and the fact that there have been great things that have happened in this game way before the overemphasis on data and analysis in baseball, I think we have to understand that it is a balance. There needs to be a balance. And if anybody is too, either old school or new school, you could point to that as the reason why they're not having the success that they're supposed to. Moving on, I will talk a little Super Bowl today since we haven't brought it up at all during the week. Be back with you tomorrow, 6 to 7 p.m., right here on Periscope, Facebook Live, and on demand on YouTube. Rob Gronkowski, I think, is going to be a very important piece of the Super Bowl, and I'm not breaking any news by saying this. Now, last year, he missed, the entire playoffs, certainly didn't play in the Super Bowl. The concussion he suffered 2 weeks ago against Jacksonville was a big deal. The fact that he may not play in the Super Bowl is going to impact the way the Philadelphia Eagles play defense. I mean, if they're able to put more pressure on a Danny Amendola, or maybe cover the running back out of the backfield, maybe not have to double the tight end, there's a chance that the Eagles, who have a very good defense, and I think their defense matches up just as solid as what the Patriots saw a couple weeks ago against Jacksonville. I think they're going to have the opportunity to succeed. Now, if Gronkowski is able to play, I make a comparison to what we saw in the first round of the playoffs, in the wild card round, when the Kansas City Chiefs were playing the Tennessee Titans in Kansas City. The Titans had a defensive game plan that was pretty contingent on stopping tight end Travis Kelce. They had the ability to run the football. They had a good running game. They had Tyreek Hill, who was a very good receiver, a speed guy. But the Titans, if they were able to stop or halt at least a little bit Travis Kelce, they'd have a very good chance to win the game. Problem was, the Kansas City Chiefs had too many weapons. They could double team Kelce, and that would free up Hill. They could put somebody on Hill, maybe give him a little bit extra help with a safety, and they could run the football. Once Travis Kelce got hurt, the Titans were able to back off the tight end and put the extra emphasis on the receivers and the running backs, and it was a completely different Kansas City Chiefs team. The problem that Jacksonville ran into last week, or a couple weeks ago when Gronkowski got hurt, is they still played the tight end the same way that they were playing Gronkowski coming in, which left guys like Lewis and Amendola open to make big plays. And I think the Eagles are going to come up, and they should be setting up two different game plans. Actually, they should be setting up three different game plans. One of them I mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the show. They should have two separate game plans, one for if Gronkowski is playing, and one for if Gronkowski is not playing. And the third one should be a completely different defensive outlook and how you're going to play Tom Brady in the fourth quarter. Not assume that through three quarters, because everything has worked, it's going to still work in the fourth quarter. Ask Jacksonville about that. Ask the Atlanta Falcons about that last year in the Super Bowl. You're seeing a different Tom Brady, a different New England offense in the fourth quarter and the third and fourth quarter of these games, especially when they're down. All of a sudden, they start to find plays that work, and defenses aren't adjusting to them. And if I'm thinking right now what to expect or what should I expect in the Super Bowl, I'm going to expect the game to be pretty close. And I would assume something along the lines of the Eagles either tied or leading going into the fourth quarter. And the difference in this game is going to be one thing. Can the Eagles find a way to stop Tom Brady late? I tell you, it seems like every one of these games, and the Jacksonville game looked like the Jaguars were going to the Super Bowl. The Falcons in the Super Bowl last year looked like they were going to be Super Bowl 51 champions. And it seems like the Patriots get themselves in a little bit deeper quicksand and find a way to get themselves out of it. Now, I look at the Eagles and I think they're ready for this stage. I really do. Even without Carson Wentz, I think they are the best team in regards to the NFC, and they represent the NFC better than any other team. Anybody that was going to go out there and say the Minnesota Vikings, well, listen, I could have said Vikings until the Vikings proved that they didn't belong on the same field as the Eagles. How much different are the Eagles without Carson Wentz? Well, Nick Foles played a game of his life a couple weeks ago in Minnesota. And Nick Foles was the starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles a couple years ago. He went through a rough experience when he got traded to the Rams. Didn't like it there, lost his job to, ironically, Case Keenum. And eventually Jared Goff. And here he was signing a deal to be the backup quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. I think there's some interesting storylines here. What if Foles could go out there and win a Super Bowl? Does that resurrect his career? Well, I'm sure if Foles wins the Super Bowl, he's going to be starting for one of the 32 teams in the NFL next season. Can he compete with Carson Wentz? I think, if the Eagles lose, let's say the one scenario is that the Patriots go out there and win, let's say 35-10. Foles has a bad game. It's all Patriots all the way. Then you look at a scenario where Foles probably comes back next year and backs up Carson Wentz again. But if you see anything close to what you saw out of Nick Foles last week or 2 weeks ago, once again, I'm still not processing this